I am not teaching, I am publicly learning. But hi and welcome to Learning for the Life in the UK test part 59, the beginning of the English Civil War part 2, while doing risk training, and if you participate in the risk training, it is at your own risk. So what have we had so far? Charles I believed in the divine right of kings, and that is the belief that the king, the monarch, is appointed by God to rule, and that he has not asked the parliament if he wanted something in the laws or in tax collecting or something. And one thing what he wanted to do, for example, was to introduce a revisited prayer book in Scotland onto the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. But that led to serious unrest. So the serious unrest in Scotland. And there was a Scottish army formed, so soldiers assembled. And Charles needed an army to stand up against the Scottish army, and he needed money for that. And he could not raise the money otherwise when he was able to do for the past 11 years, just by himself without the parliament. This time he needed the parliament. In 1640, he recalled Parliament to ask it for funds. So in 1640, he called the House of Lords and the House of Commons together and asked them for funding, so for giving money. I'm not sure who's the money giving where. But the English Parliament has two houses, and the one is the House of Lords, the House of Commons and the House of Lords. There's the nobility and the bishops and great landowners, and in the House of Commons there are wealthy people from towns and cities and knights who were elected in by a portion of the population. So he called them in 1640 to ask them for money. Many in Parliament were Puritans, and luckily that is not something which we have to know all from the beginning. And Puritans are a group of Protestants who advocated strict and simple religious doctrine and worship. Okay, let's read on. They did not agree with the king's religious views and disliked his reforms of the Church of England. So the Puritans, they are Protestants. So about Protestants, we know that they, in this book, just according to this book, that they wanted to read the Bible in their own language and not in Latin, and that they were not praying to saints and not worshipping at altars, and that they are in belief that their personal relationship is more important than to submit to the church. Now, these Puritans are Protestants who are advocating strict and simple religious doctrine and worship. That explanation helps a little, but it doesn't really explain anything. What are strict and simple religious doctrines? Puritans, they were a form of Protestants in the Parliament in 1640, and they did not agree with the religious views of the king, and disliked his reform which he done of the Church of England. The revisited prayer book which he wanted to introduce was on the Presbyterian Church of Scotland. But the Puritans, the Protestantic Puritans in the English Parliament in 1640 did not like what he did not like what he did on the Church of England as reforms. And they weren't giving him the money, and they did that even not when the Scottish army had invaded with soldiers the English ground. The first exercise, we're just having a comfortable stand and we're having the arms next to us, form the fists with hands, and I will bring these fists down and up. And we're having 3 rules. The first rule is that we're stopping immediately as soon as we feel pain. The second rule is that we're going only as far as we can go with a little bit of effort. And the third rule is that we're not overdoing it. So we're doing only as a few as we can do good without reaching our potential. So we're going just up, and now we do it only for last time. And now a similar exercise, same setup, but now we're bringing these hand formed fists to the inside and to the other side. And let's say one more time. And now back to Charles I. And his problems to raise money, which was the parliament, consisting out of many Protestant Puritans who were opposing his religious views, were giving him even after the Scottish army had started to invade England. Another rebellion began in Ireland because the Roman Catholics in Ireland were afraid of the growing power of the Puritans. So the Puritans are Protestantic. They believe in strict and simple religious doctrine. So the people in Scotland made a serious unrest, and they were invading England. And they were Protestantic, but the Presbyterian Church of Scotland did not like the imposed revisited prayer book by Charles I, who was also Protestantic. And the Roman Catholics of Ireland were afraid of the growing power of the Protestant Puritans. Parliament took this opportunity to demand control of the English army. A change that would have transferred substantial power from the king to Parliament. Parliament took this opportunity to demand control of the English army. A change that would have transferred substantial power from the king to Parliament. In response, no, did that happen? A change that would have, so it didn't happen. So let's make the first part, and then we're reading on and coming back. And so they used this opportunity. It's not explained, but I think it was, they said, we are giving you only the money if you're giving us the control of the English army. That is meant, they used that charge. Yes, they used that chance, and that would be a change. So they wanted to use that opportunity. What opportunity is not explained in detail? We can guess around. There can be 100 reasons as an opportunity. It's most likely the most obvious. But we're having the hands now flat next to us, and we're bringing them to the inside and to the outside. And that exercise is called the magician. Just a few more times. And the last time to the outside. And we're so far into the time, we're going to continue, I think, with all exercises. Hands flat next to us, and now up, and we're having a flat hands while doing it. And down. And now the TRX, no, not the TRX, the quadrangular castle architect. Hands out the fists, but bringing these fists to the inside. And up. And to the outside. And down. And to the inside. And now down. And to the outside, and up, and no, last change to the inside. And last exercise, the grip anxious to feel. The arm next to us, hand from to a fist, and we bring this fist down and pressing carefully against it. And a bit from the outside. And a bit from the top. And a bit from the bottom. Now we feel aligned, the hand from to a fist, we bring it down and pressing carefully against it. And pulling a bit from the outside. And we're pressing a bit from the top. And the last time, now we're pressing a bit on the downside. Now just a bit of relaxation. The arm long, make a little bend and go with moderate power or pressure over the middle part of the lower arm. Now with the other arm, a little bend, we're going with moderate pressure over the middle part of the lower arm. And with that, we're done with the wrist training, and we can go back trying to understand what opportunity we're talking about, because the last thing we were talking about was the rebellion in Ireland. So was the rebellion in Ireland the great opportunity, or was it the army invading England, or was it both? Let's start with that. I understand it is both, but that isn't obvious. I'm not so sure. Here's written, even after the Scottish army invaded England, we were still refusing to give money to raise an English army to defend England. I'm not so sure if we really could say that we thought, hey, that is a great opportunity. Yes, we used it as an opportunity, okay, but... So now, a change that would have transferred substantial power from the king to parliament, and is talked of giving the control of the army into the parliament, and not in the king's hand. In response, sort of that demand, I guess the demand is, we are giving you the money if we get the control over the army. Yes, the demand is, no, it is not. In response, was it in what I just said? Let's see. In response, Charles I entered the House of Commons and tried to arrest 5 parliamentary leaders, but they had been warned and were not there. Okay. So the parliament took the opportunity that there was a military growing threat against England, for which the King Charles needed money, and they weren't giving it him unless he would give control of the army into the hands of parliaments. And so Charles I entered the House of Commons, and he wanted to arrest 5 parliamentary leaders. But they weren't there because they knew that Charles I was coming to arrest them. And since then, no monarch has set foot in the Commons since. So what they mean is that in these 400 years, never a reigning monarch, has entered the House of Commons. Civil war between the king and the parliament could not now be avoided and began in 1642. So now a civil war started between the king and the parliament. And it started in 1642. The whole thing started in 1640, where he needed the money to assemble an army. In 1642, the civil war started between the king and the parliament. The country split into those who supported the king, the Cavaliers, and those who supported parliament, the Roundheads. So there were 2 parties, the Cavaliers and the Roundheads. The Cavaliers supported the king, and the Roundheads, the Parliament. And that is what we have to the English Civil War in... No, not just this part, because at the end of that part, we will repeat it a couple of times because it will be certainly important in the next parts. So we will get back to that part. But now, I thank you very much, and until next time.